A summer storm in Pinewood, a tale of justice and community. It was one of those golden July afternoons in suburban Atlanta, where the Georgia sun blazed like a proud beacon, casting long shadows across manicured lawns. In the Pinewood neighborhood, a quiet enclave of colonial homes and blooming magnolias, the air hummed with the promise of summer. For Daniel Thompson, a 52-year-old respiratory therapist at St. Mary's Hospital, these fleeting moments at home were precious. Having just finished a grueling morning shift, he was bracing for a 12-hour night shift starting at 7 p.m. The brief window between shifts was meant for sleep, but his three children, Malik, 12, Layla, 10, and young Ethan, 8, had other plans. "Dad, please, it's so hot. You promised we could use the pool," Layla had begged that morning, her wide eyes sparkling with the kind of innocence that could melt even the most exhausted heart. Daniel had indeed promised, but the weight of fatigue was heavy. He'd been pulling double shifts for weeks, saving for the college funds that loomed larger with each passing year. That's when his brother Marcus stepped in like a gift from above. A 38-year-old Army Ranger stationed at Fort Benning, Marcus had called the night before, mentioning a 3-day leave. "I'll swing by, watch the kids, let you catch some ZS," he'd offered, his voice steady with the calm assurance of a man who'd faced far worse than a trio of energetic children. Daniel's home in Pinewood wasn't the grandest, but it was his pride, a 3-bedroom colonial with a backyard pool they'd added 2 years ago after years of scrimping and smart investments. He and his late wife, Vanessa, had dreamed of this place, a sanctuary for their family. The neighborhood was mostly white, but the Thompsons had been welcomed, at least on the surface. There were occasional sidelong glances, hushed conversations that stopped when Daniel approached, and the odd comment about property values, but nothing overt. Nothing, that is, until Margaret Hensley. Margaret, 55, lived 3 houses down in a pristine home with roses that could have graced a magazine cover. Her husband, Charles, a city councilman, was a quiet man who seemed to exist only to echo her opinions. In the 2 years since the Thompsons moved in, Margaret had filed 6 HOA complaints against them. Once for leaving trash cans out too long during Vanessa's final hospital stay, once for Malik's basketball hoop, promptly removed, once for Ethan's 8th birthday party that ended at 7 p.m., twice for parking violations when family visited, and once for the unsightly vegetable garden Vanessa had built. Each complaint was delivered with a syrupy smile and a chirpy, "I'm just ensuring our community standards, dear." That afternoon, as Daniel collapsed into bed around 1 p.m., the joyful sounds of his children splashing in the pool drifted through the window. Marcus had arrived, and the kids were thrilled to see their uncle. The backyard was enclosed with a 6-foot wooden fence Daniel had installed himself, and the pool area had a safety gate that met county regulations. From his bedroom, Daniel could see Marcus at the patio table, one eye on his phone, the other on the kids playing Marco Polo. Setting his alarm for 5 p.m., Daniel drifted into a deep, much-needed sleep, unaware that Margaret Hensley was about to turn a sunny afternoon into a storm that would shake Pinewood to its core. At 2:17 p.m., Margaret was on her daily power walk, clad in a teal designer workout set that screamed money. The laughter and splashes from the Thompsons' backyard caught her ear. Instead of moving on, she stopped at their side gate, where a small gap in the fence, something Daniel had meant to fix, offered a view of the pool. There, she saw 3 children swimming under their uncle's supervision. But Margaret saw something else, an opportunity to assert her authority. What happened next would spark a confrontation that would ripple through the neighborhood for months. Marcus noticed the gate rattling first. A hand reached over, fumbling with the latch. His military instincts kicked in. "Kids, stay in the shallow end," he called, striding toward the gate. Before he could reach it, the gate flew open, banging against the fence. Margaret Hensley stormed in, her blonde hair in a tight ponytail, sunglasses perched on her head, her face a mask of righteous fury. "Excuse me," she snapped, ignoring Marcus. "What is going on here? Where are these children's parents?" Marcus positioned himself between Margaret and the pool, where the kids had gone silent, treading water with wide eyes. "Ma'am, I'm their uncle, supervising them. You're on private property. Please leave, he said, his voice calm but firm, the kind that had commanded troops in war zones. At 6 feet 2 inches with a linebacker's build, Marcus was imposing, but Margaret barely glanced at him. She marched toward the pool, pointing at the kids. These children are unsupervised, making excessive noise. I've had enough of this family disrupting our neighborhood. Ma'am, I'm their uncle, and I'm supervising, Marcus repeated, stepping into her path. You're trespassing. Leave now. Margaret finally looked at him, her expression shifting from indignation to suspicion. And who are you? I know the family here, and you don't live here, she said, clutching her purse tighter, as if Marcus's presence was a threat. I'm Marcus Thompson, brother of Daniel Thompson, who owns this home. I'm watching my niece and nephews while their dad rests before his hospital shift, he replied, his tone steady, but his senses alert. 20 years in the military, including time as an equal opportunity advisor, had honed his ability to spot prejudice brewing. Margaret scoffed. Well, I find that hard to believe. These children have been screaming for an hour, dragging down property values. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. The Thompsons' backyard was surrounded by homes set far apart, with oak trees muffling sound. The nearest neighbor, Angela Davis, had her own grandkids swimming regularly without issue. Layla swam to the pool's edge. Uncle Marcus, who's that lady? Why is she mad? Before Marcus could answer, Margaret snapped. Young lady, proper children use indoor voices, even outside. Didn't your parents teach you manners? Marcus's eyes narrowed. Ms. Margaret Hensley, vice president of the Pinewood HOA, she declared, chin high, as if it gave her dominion. Ms. Hensley, you're trespassing. These kids are behaving normally for a summer day. Leave now, or I'll call the authorities. Margaret's face flushed. Call them? I've already called the police. Marcus was stunned. On what grounds? Public indecency and disturbance, she shrieked, gesturing at the kids. They're practically naked, screaming in full view of the neighborhood. And there's an unauthorized adult here. Marcus glanced at the kids. Malik and Ethan in swim trunks. Layla in a modest seahorse pattern one-piece with a swim skirt. They were in a fenced, private pool, supervised by family. Ms. Hensley, these kids are dressed appropriately, on private property, supervised. You're the one trespassing and harassing, he said, his voice low. Margaret's eyes darted around, searching for a violation. Finding none, she pivoted. I don't recognize you. How do I know you're authorized? You could be anyone. The implication was clear, and Marcus's jaw tightened. I don't need your authorization to be on my brother's property, he replied. Since you've called the police, let's wait for them out front. He gestured to the gate. Margaret didn't move. Instead, she pulled out her phone and started snapping pictures of the pool and the kids. I'm documenting for the HOA and police. Marcus stepped in front of her camera. Put your phone away. You don't have permission to photograph minors. I have every right, she insisted. No, you don't, Marcus shot back. Keep going, and I'll add invasion of privacy to the complaints I'm filing. The standoff was interrupted by a distant siren. Margaret's face lit up with vindictive glee. Finally, we'll see who's right. Marcus turned to the kids, huddled at the pool's far end. Everything's okay, guys. Keep swimming, shallow end. I'm going to talk to the officer. He escorted Margaret to the front yard, not trusting her to leave alone, and positioned himself to watch both the approaching police car and the backyard gate. As the cruiser pulled up, Margaret practically bounced, ready to unleash her grievances. But the arrival of Officer Robert Callahan would mark the beginning of her unraveling, not her triumph. Officer Robert Callahan, a 15-year veteran of the Fulton County Police Department, stepped out of his cruiser with the measured calm of someone who'd seen every flavor of suburban drama. His salt and pepper hair and steady gaze took in the scene. A woman practically vibrating with indignation and a man standing with the disciplined posture of soldier. Margaret Hensley pounced before Callahan could even introduce himself. Officer, thank goodness you're here. This man is watching improperly supervised children causing a disturbance, and they're practically naked. Callahan raised a hand. Ma'am, slow down. I'm Officer Callahan. Names, please. Marcus stepped forward, hands visible, a habit from years navigating tense checkpoints. Marcus Thompson, sir. I'm watching my brother's kids in their backyard pool. This woman entered without permission and refuses to leave despite being asked multiple times. Margaret bristled. Margaret Hensley, Vice President of the Pinewood HOA. These children have been screaming for hours, in public view, and this man claims to be their uncle, but I've never seen him, and the homeowner isn't here. Callahan nodded, jotting notes. MS. Hensley, you called about public indecency and a disturbance. Where's this happening? Margaret pointed to the backyard. In their pool. You can hear them from the street. Callahan tilted his head. The pool behind a privacy fence on private property? Well, yes, but, ma'am, kids swimming in a private pool aren't committing public indecency, no matter how loud they are, he said, his tone professional but firm. Margaret wasn't deterred. But there are noise ordinances, and this man, I don't believe he's authorized. Marcus maintained his composure. Officer, I'm Daniel Thompson's brother. Daniel owns this home and is asleep before his night shift at St. Mary's Hospital. I'm on leave from Fort Benning, watching the kids. I have ID if needed. Callahan nodded. May I see it, sir? Marcus handed over his military ID. Margaret interrupted. That doesn't prove he's related to the homeowner. Callahan turned to her. MS. Hensley, how did you get into the backyard? The question caught her off guard. I heard the disturbance on my walk and investigated. So, you entered private property without permission? He clarified. I had every right, as HOA vice president, to check violations. Marcus interjected. Officer, our security camera caught her pushing open the gate and entering unannounced. She then approached the kids and started taking photos without consent. It was a slight bluff. The camera was at the front door, not the gate, but Margaret didn't know that, and her face paled. You took photos of minors in swimwear without parental consent. Callahan asked, his tone sharpening. For documentation, for the HOA. Margaret protested. Callahan sighed. HOA authority doesn't override trespassing or privacy laws. Entering private property without permission is trespassing. Photographing minors without consent, especially while swimming, raises serious concerns. Margaret's indignation wavered. They were disturbing the peace. If you had a noise complaint, you call the non-emergency line, not enter someone's property, Callahan said. I'd like to see the area. Marcus led Callahan to the backyard, Margaret trailing behind, her confidence fraying. The kids sat on the pool steps, whispering, clearly shaken. Callahan surveyed the scene. A well-kept pool, proper fencing, 3 kids in appropriate swimwear, no hazards. Kids look like they're just enjoying a summer swim, he remarked. He approached them. Hey, I'm Officer Callahan. You okay? Malik, the eldest, spoke up. Yes, sir. We were swimming with Uncle Marcus. Did we do something wrong? Callahan's expression softened. No, son, you're fine. You're allowed to have fun in your pool. Margaret couldn't stay quiet. Officer, they were screaming earlier, causing a disturbance. Callahan turned. MS. Hensley, kids playing in a pool during the day isn't typically a noise violation. We don't enforce noise complaints unless it's after 11 p.m. or before 7 a.m. Margaret's frustration boiled over. So you're letting them get away with this? What about the unauthorized adult? Callahan's patience thinned. Mr. Thompson has provided ID and a reasonable explanation. There's no evidence of criminal activity. He turned to Marcus. Is the homeowner available? Marcus nodded. He's sleeping, but I can wake him. I'd appreciate a quick talk, Callahan said. Marcus went upstairs, gently shaking Daniel awake. Everything's fine, but a police officer needs to speak with you. That Hensley woman called the cops on the kids for swimming. Daniel sat up, groggy, pulling on a t-shirt. She did what? He stumbled downstairs to find Callahan in the living room, Margaret near the front door, and his kids wrapped in towels on the couch, looking scared. Mr. Thompson, I'm Officer Callahan. Sorry to disturb you, Callahan said, shaking Daniel's hand. He explained the situation. Margaret's trespassing, her photos, her 911 call claiming indecency. Daniel's anger simmered, especially at the mention of photos. "Let me get this straight," he said, voice tight. "She entered my property, harassed my kids while they were supervised, took photos without consent, and called the police for indecency." "That's about it," Callahan confirmed. Daniel faced Margaret, who looked uncomfortable. "Ms. Hensley, what was your issue? Because it looks like you saw black kids enjoying their pool and decided that was a problem." Margaret flushed. "That's not true. This is about neighborhood standards." Callahan cut in. "Mr. Thompson, do you want to press charges for trespassing?" The question hung heavy. Margaret's eyes widened. Daniel glanced at his kids, watching him, learning how to handle conflict. "Not today," he said, "but I want on record that she trespassed and photographed my kids without consent. And I want those photos deleted." Callahan nodded. "Ms. Hensley, delete the photos. I need to verify." Reluctantly, Margaret complied, emptying her phone's deleted folder under Callahan's watch. "Now," Daniel said, staring at Margaret, "you're not welcome on my property. Not as a neighbor, not as HOA vice president, not ever. If you have concerns, use the non-emergency line or HOA channels. Do not approach my kids again." "Understood." Margaret opened her mouth, but Callahan interjected. "HOA authority doesn't override a homeowner's rights. Mr. Thompson has barred you from his property. Respect that, or face trespassing charges." Margaret's posture stiffened, her pride bruised but intact. She might have left with some dignity, if not for what happened next. Ethan, clinging to Daniel's side, whispered, "Dad, that lady called us bad names when Uncle Marcus wasn't close enough to hear." Daniel froze. "What names, Ethan?" The boy hesitated, glancing at Margaret, who'd stopped dead. "It's okay, buddy," Daniel urged. "She said we were ghetto kids making too much noise and people like us shouldn't be here." Ethan mumbled. The room chilled. Marcus stepped forward, his face darkening. Callahan turned to Margaret, whose face drained of color. "That's a lie," she sputtered. "I never said that. They're making it up." "My kids don't lie," Daniel said, voice calm but laced with fury. "And they don't know what fabrication means." How'd Ethan come up with those words? Callahan looked at the other kids. "Did you hear anything similar?" Layla nodded. "She said it when she came in. I was near the edge of the pool." Malik added, "She said Uncle Marcus was probably some random black guy hanging around. That's why she called the cops." Margaret's rage exploded. "This is outrageous. They're coached." She stomped her foot, a tantrum unfit for her age. "Do you know who my husband is? He's on the city council, and he'll hear about this harassment." Callahan remained unfazed. "Ms. Hensley, the law applies to everyone. It's time for you to leave." But Margaret, unraveling, jabbed a finger at Daniel. "This isn't over, Thompson. Pools need permits, and I'll check every document. I'll find something." Daniel shook his head. "My permits are in order, but thanks for making your intentions clear." Margaret, undeterred, stormed toward the patio doors. "Ms. Hensley," Callahan called. "Where are you going?" "To document the pool for violations," she declared, yanking the door open. Daniel and Marcus exchanged incredulous looks, following with Callahan close behind. Margaret stood at the pool's edge, snapping photos. "Improper fencing, health hazards." Callahan stepped forward. "Put the phone down. You were told to leave." Ignoring him, Margaret circled the pool. Marcus moved to intercept. "Ma'am, stop." In a blur, Margaret stepped back, her heel catching in a deck gap. She wobbled, arms flailing, then tumbled backward into the pool with a spectacular splash. For a moment, no one moved. Then Margaret surfaced, gasping, her hair plastered to her face, her teal outfit ruined. "Help! I can't swim," she screamed, though the water was chest deep. Marcus, trained in water rescues, jumped in, but Margaret fought him, scratching his arms. "Don't touch me," she shrieked. "Ma'am, I'm helping you," Marcus said, dodging her flails. In a final act of defiance, Margaret spat in his face. The backyard fell silent. Callahan, at the pool's edge, said coldly, "That's a salt mess." Hensley. Marcus wiped his face, guiding the struggling woman to the steps before climbing out. Margaret emerged, dripping and furious. "He pushed me. I want him arrested." Callahan's skepticism was palpable. "MS. Hensley, I saw everything. No one pushed you." Margaret Hensley stood dripping on the pool deck, her mascara-streaked face a portrait of humiliated fury. "Are you calling me a liar?" she screeched at Officer Callahan, her voice hitting a pitch that could have cracked glass. Daniel Thompson, standing beside his brother Marcus, felt his patience evaporate. "Officer," he said, his voice steady despite the anger coursing through him, "I'd like to press charges now for trespassing, harassing my children, and assaulting my brother by spitting on him." Margaret's eyes bulged. "You can't be serious. I'm the victim. I nearly drowned in this filthy pool." "The pool you trespassed to criticize, then fell into while taking unauthorized photos after being told to leave," Daniel countered. Callahan pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Callahan. I need another unit at 1437 Maple Lane for an arrest." Margaret's mouth fell open. "Arrest? You're arresting me?" "Yes, ma'am," Callahan replied. "For criminal trespass, disorderly conduct, and simple assault. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." What followed was a spectacle that would become Pinewood legend. Margaret, soaking wet in her ruined teal outfit, was escorted to a police cruiser in handcuffs, alternating between threats of lawsuits and demands to call her husband, Councilman Charles Hensley. Daniel's children watched from the front porch, their eyes wide, but no longer fearful, as the cruiser pulled away. Callahan turned to Daniel. "Mr. Thompson, you and your brother need to come to the station for statements. Given your shift at St. Mary's, we'll expedite yours." Daniel glanced at his watch, 4:30 p.m. His alarm was set for 5 o'clock, and his shift loomed. "Officer, I start at 7 o'clock. Can we make this quick?" Callahan nodded. "We'll arrange it. Your brother may need to stay longer since he was assaulted." Marcus clapped Daniel's shoulder. "Go get ready for work, man. I've got this." As Callahan left, promising another officer for statements, Daniel gathered his kids inside. They were quiet, processing the chaos. Sitting them down, he noted the time. His 3 hours of sleep were already catching up with him. "Are you guys okay?" he asked, looking at Malik, Layla, and Ethan. Layla spoke first. "Dad, did she get arrested because of us?" Daniel shook his head. "No, sweetheart. She got arrested for her choices, coming onto our property, saying cruel things, ignoring requests to leave, and spitting on Uncle Marcus. Those were her decisions, not yours." Malik frowned. "But if we hadn't been loud—" "Stop," Daniel said gently. "You were kids playing in our pool on a summer day. There's nothing wrong with that. MS. Hensley's issue wasn't your noise. It was that she didn't think we belonged here. That's her problem." Ethan, still clinging to the day's events, asked, "Dad, do we have to move now?" Daniel's heart cracked. He pulled Ethan into a hug. "No, buddy. This is our home, and we're staying." Marcus caught Daniel's eye, his expression a mix of sorrow and resolve. Neither knew then how this incident would reshape Pinewood, but the seeds of change were already sown. As Daniel showered and dressed for his shift, Marcus gave his statement to his second officer. By 6:30 p.m., when Daniel left for St. Mary's, Margaret had been processed at the county jail, and Charles Hensley was pulling strings to secure her release. At the hospital, Daniel barely had time to change into scrubs. His colleague, Sarah Mitchell, raised an eyebrow. "Cutting it close, Daniel." He gave her a quick rundown of the afternoon, and her jaw dropped. "She fell in the pool and spat on your brother? Some people can't stand to see us thrive." Throughout his shift, Daniel tried to focus on patience, but Margaret's racist outburst gnawed at him. What hurt most was its impact on his kids. They'd been so happy in Pinewood, and now he feared their sense of security was shaken. During a midnight break, he checked his phone. Marcus had texted, "Margaret's out on bail, court date next month." Charles tried to get charges dropped. Cops held firm. Got video statements from the kids. Clear and consistent. "She's done." Daniel felt a surge of gratitude for Marcus's steady handling of the crisis. The next morning, exhausted after his shift, Daniel returned home to find Marcus at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, laptop open, and a determined glint in his eye. "How was work?" Marcus asked. "The usual," Daniel replied, pouring coffee. "What's got you so focused?" Marcus's expression was one Daniel knew from their childhood. Trouble for someone. "Research. Did you know Margaret's been named in 3 HOA complaints for discriminatory enforcement? Or that Charles's council seat is up for re-election in 4 months?" Daniel sat down. "Marcus, what are you planning?" "Justice, not revenge," Marcus said. "These people have been intimidating families like ours for years. It's time they faced consequences." Over the next few hours, as the kids slept late, Marcus shared his findings. Margaret had targeted minority homeowners with HOA violations while ignoring similar issues at white-owned homes. Charles had campaigned on neighborhood standards, a dog whistle in a diversifying county. "The criminal charges are just the start," Marcus said. "I've contacted a civil rights attorney for my Army EO work. We've got a case for harassment, discrimination, and emotional distress." Daniel rubbed his eyes. "I just want peace for my kids, not a legal war." Marcus leaned forward. "I get it, but this isn't just about us. What about the next black family in Pinewood? Or Angela's grandkids? How long before Margaret decides they're too loud?" Daniel thought of Ethan's fear of moving, Layla's shaken confidence. "You're right," he said. "What's the plan?" In the days that followed, as Marcus extended his leave, Pinewood buzzed with gossip. Neighbors stopped by, some with support, others fishing for details. A few of Margaret's allies gave Daniel cold stares at the grocery store. Margaret, under a court order to avoid the Thompsons' property, waged a whisper campaign, claiming Daniel had fabricated the incident to target her. Charles made a clumsy attempt at damage control 4 days later, approaching Daniel in the community pool parking lot as he unloaded toys for a swim with Angela's grandkids. A deliberate show of resilience. "Mr. Thompson," Charles called, his thin frame and pinched expression betraying his discomfort. Daniel straightened, alert. "Councilman Hensley." Charles forced a smile. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Margaret can be zealous about standards, but she meant no harm." Daniel let the words linger. "Your wife trespassed, used racist slurs against my kids, and spat on my brother." Which part was the misunderstanding? Charles's smile faltered. "These racism accusations are unfounded. She was concerned about noise as HOA vice president. Was it her duty to call my kids ghetto kids or assume Marcus was a random black guy?" Daniel asked, voice level. Charles's face hardened. "She denies saying that. Kids misinterpret things. 3 kids with identical stories." Daniel shook his head. "There are criminal charges and a civil suit coming. Talk to your lawyer, not me." Charles's civility vanished. "You're making a mistake, Thompson. I have connections. This won't end well." Daniel met his gaze. "Is that a threat? Because that'd be great for our case." A passing family caught Charles's eye, and he retreated, nodding curtly. Angela, who'd overheard, approached. "That man needs to learn when he's beaten. Margaret's been spinning tales, but nobody's buying it. Callahan's wife is in my book club. The police report doesn't match her story." The neighborhood soon learned of video evidence. Unbeknownst to anyone, the Thompsons' doorbell camera had captured audio of Margaret's initial confrontation, including the ghetto kid slur. Its range extended far enough to contradict her denials. By week's end, Margaret resigned as HOA vice president, citing personal reasons. Charles skipped campaign events, and Daniel's inbox filled with messages from civil rights groups. But the most significant shift came from Angela Davis, a retired judge and neighbor. One evening, as their kids played in her backyard, she made a proposal. "Daniel, what happened to your family was wrong, but it's a chance to change Pinewood. The HOA's bylaws give too much power to people like Margaret. We can reform it. New leadership, anti-discrimination rules, real consequences. We need you on the board." Daniel hesitated. His hospital shifts, single parenting, and legal battles left little time. "Angela, I'm stretched thin. Think about it," she urged. "Pinewood's changing. We can guide it or let it flounder." Watching his kids laugh freely, Daniel realized true safety for them meant reshaping the community to prevent another Margaret. "I'll consider it," he promised, feeling a flicker of hope. August arrived in Pinewood with a heat that matched the intensity of the legal battles now unfolding. Margaret Hensley's criminal case was moving forward, despite Charles Hensley's attempts to leverage his city council connections to have the charges reduced or dismissed. The civil suit, filed with the help of Marcus's contact, attorney Michael Carter, had grown beyond Margaret's actions to expose a pattern of discriminatory enforcement by the Pinewood HOA under her leadership. Carter, a sharp civil rights lawyer with a reputation for dismantling systemic bias, had compiled a damning case. Photos showed white-owned homes with overgrown lawns or faded paint, untouched by citations, while minority homeowners were fined for minor infractions like slightly tall grass or a car parked an inch off-center. Emails between HOA board members revealed discussions about making the neighborhood less appealing to certain elements, a thinly veiled reference to families like the Thompsons. They were sloppy, Carter explained during a meeting at Daniel Thompson's dining room table, his laptop open to a spreadsheet of evidence. They thought their positions made them untouchable, so they put their biases in writing. Marcus, who'd extended his leave to see the case through, nodded grimly. Classic power corruption. They forgot the rules apply to them, too. The discovery process uncovered more. Margaret had run a vendetta campaign against several homeowners she deemed undesirable, using HOA resources to harass them into leaving. 3 families, 2 Black, 1 Latino, had sold their homes below market value after relentless fines and citations made life in Pinewood unbearable. What Margaret and Charles hadn't anticipated was Pinewood's shifting demographics. Younger, more diverse families were moving in, replacing the old guard who'd clung to an exclusionary vision of the neighborhood. This became evident at the August HOA meeting, held in the community clubhouse on a humid Tuesday evening. Following Margaret's resignation, the board had limped along with an interim vice president. Tonight, they'd vote on a permanent new board, and Angela Davis had been busy. In the weeks since her conversation with Daniel, she'd rallied a coalition of homeowners to reform the HOA. They'd reviewed the bylaws, pinpointed loopholes that enabled abuse, and nominated a diverse slate of candidates. Daniel, after much soul-searching, had agreed to run for vice president. His hospital schedule was a hurdle, but Angela countered every objection. Meetings could align with his shifts, some business could be virtual, and his perspective as a healthcare worker and single father was invaluable. "You've already faced down Margaret," she'd said with a wry smile. "The rest is cake." The clubhouse was packed, with triple the usual attendance. Charles Hensley sat in the front row, his face a mask of barely contained disdain as Angela presented the reform platform. Margaret was absent, her lawyer advising her to avoid public scrutiny. The voting was tense but orderly. When the results were announced, the room erupted in applause. The reform candidates swept the board. Angela as president, Daniel as vice president, Mrs. Lee, a Korean-American accountant, as treasurer, Dr. Martinez, a pediatrician, as secretary, and Mr. Singh, a tech engineer, as member-at-large. Charles stormed out, his exit a symbol of the old guard's fading grip. Residents swarmed the new board with congratulations, their enthusiasm palpable. Pinewood was no longer the fiefdom of the Hensleys. The new board's first actions were symbolic but potent. They renamed the newsletter from Pinewood Standards to Pinewood Community Link, established a welcome committee for new residents, and created a community garden in a neglected common area. Most crucially, they rewrote enforcement procedures to require documentation, warnings, and an appeals process before fines could be issued. These changes sent a clear message. Pinewood was for everyone. Meanwhile, Margaret's criminal case reached a turning point. Faced with the doorbell camera audio capturing her ghetto kid's slur and consistent testimony from Daniel's children Marcus, she accepted a plea deal, guilty to criminal trespass and simple assault, with a suspended sentence, community service, a fine, and mandatory diversity training. The judge, known for his no-nonsense rulings, ensured the fine stung, though it didn't bankrupt the Hensleys. The civil suit, however, loomed larger. Charles, sensing his political career crumbling, pushed for a settlement. Carter advised Daniel and Marcus to consider it. "Trials are unpredictable," he said during a conference call. "A settlement gets you compensation without years of litigation." Marcus was reluctant. They need to be held up as an example. But Daniel thought of his kids, Malik's quiet protectiveness, Layla's shaken confidence, Ethan's fear of moving. A prolonged trial could re-traumatize them. "What's the offer?" he asked. Carter outlined a substantial package: compensation for emotional distress, punitive damages for the HOA's discriminatory pattern, and full attorney fees. Non-monetary terms included a public apology from the Hensleys and Charles sponsoring a city council resolution to strengthen anti-discrimination rules for HOAs countywide. "It's everything we'd get at trial," Carter admitted. They want this gone before Charles's re-election. After discussing it with Marcus and weighing the toll on his family, Daniel agreed to settle. The paperwork was finalized in late September, just as Charles's campaign kicked into gear. The apology was set for the October HOA meeting. Margaret arrived, looking subdued, her usual arrogance gone. Charles stood beside her, his politician smile strained as local news cameras rolled. The story had snowballed beyond Pinewood, sparking debates about discriminatory housing practices. "I offer my sincere apologies to the Thompson family," Margaret read, her voice flat. "My actions on July 12th were inappropriate, discriminatory, and harmful. I recognize the pain I caused, especially to the children, and I'm committed to doing better." The words were rehearsed, but the settlement ensured accountability. Charles's speech introducing the anti-discrimination resolution was equally stiff, but marked a tangible policy shift. As they left, Margaret glanced back at Daniel, her expression unreadable, not quite remorse, but an acknowledgement that her worldview had cost her dearly. In November, Charles lost his re-election bid by a wide margin, the pool incident a defining campaign issue. The settlement funds were allocated thoughtfully: college savings for the kids, legal expenses, and a neighborhood improvement fund to help residents with repairs, countering the old HOA's punitive approach. The most profound change, however, was in Daniel's children. Initially rattled by Margaret's hatred, they watched Pinewood rally around them. They saw justice pursued through legal channels and systems reformed from within. One October evening, as they sat on the backyard patio watching the sunset over the pool, now fitted with a proper privacy screen, Malik asked, "Dad, are you glad a mess?" Hensley fell in the pool. Daniel chose his words carefully. "I'm not glad about what happened, but I'm glad for what followed. How we stood up, how the neighborhood united, how we made changes for other families." Layla, ever thoughtful, added, "A mess. Davis says sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air." Daniel smiled. "She's right." Ethan, now 9, chimed in, "I'm just glad we can swim without mean people yelling." That simplicity was what mattered most. Pinewood's transformation mirrored the crisp November air. The holiday season brought the first neighborhood-wide celebration under the new HOA, a multicultural winter festival replacing the old Christmas lane competition, which had favored wealthy homes. Families shared traditions: Diwali from the Singhs, Posada from the Martinezes, Korean New Year from Elise. Daniel contributed sweet potato pie from his grandmother's recipe and Kwanzaa stories presented with his kids. Participating as equals, not outsiders, meant everything. The settlement money also eased practical burdens. Daniel reduced his shifts slightly, gaining time for his kids and HOA duties. Home improvements, fixing the deck, upgrading pool safety, adding the privacy screen, made their backyard a true sanctuary. Marcus returned to Fort Benning, but visited often, a hero to the kids and many neighbors. The Hensleys listed their home in October, citing a career relocation, but everyone knew they couldn't face a community where their influence had collapsed. They moved out before Christmas, avoiding the festival's vibrant unity. Their house sold to a mixed-race couple, the Carters, with teenage twins. Daniel, on the welcome committee, greeted them with a basket and event invitations. "We heard Pinewood's inclusive," Christine Carter said. It's why we chose it. Her husband, David, nodded. Our last neighborhood wasn't welcoming. Knowing the HOA supports diversity matters. Daniel smiled. It wasn't always this way, but we've changed a lot. The Carter's twins, Noah and Ava, befriended Daniel's kids, and soon the pool echoed with teenage laughter, exactly as it should. The Winter Festival in Pinewood culminated in a New Year's Eve gathering at the community clubhouse, a fitting capstone to a transformative year. As midnight neared, Angela Davis clinked her glass for attention. Before we count down to 2025, she began, her voice warm yet commanding, I want to reflect on how far Pinewood has come. What happened to the Thompson family last July could have torn us apart. Instead, it united us in realizing our strength lies in inclusion. She raised her glass. To new beginnings, to community, to the better Pinewood we're building together. The cheer that followed, from residents of every background, families of every shape, felt like a healing tide washing over the wounds of the past. As January melted into February, Pinewood's changes took root. The community garden broke ground in early spring, with plots assigned by lottery, not favoritism. The Pinewood Community Link newsletter showcased a different family's heritage each month, weaving a tapestry of shared stories. The Neighborhood Improvement Fund, seeded by the settlement, helped 3 families with critical repairs, new roofs, fixed plumbing, before the April rains arrived. But the most poignant moment came on a warm April day, nearly 9 months after the pool incident, when history and hope converged in Daniel Thompson's backyard. Daniel was opening the pool for the season with Malik, Layla, and Ethan testing water chemistry and scrubbing tiles when the doorbell rang. Malik jogged to answer it, returning with a puzzled look. Dad, there's an older lady who says she used to live in the Carter's house years ago. She wants to talk to you. Curious, Daniel dried his hands and went to the front door. There stood Evelyn Brooks, a petite black woman in her late 70s, her silver hair elegantly styled, her presence radiating quiet dignity. Mr. Thompson, I'm Evelyn Brooks, she introduced herself. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, Daniel said, inviting her in. What brings you here, Mrs. Brooks? She settled on the living room sofa, glancing around with a wistful smile. Your home is lovely. You've made it a true haven. Thank you, Daniel replied, still unsure of her purpose. Sensing his curiosity, Evelyn's smile deepened. Let me explain. I grew up in Pinewood, in the house the Carters now own. My father, James Brooks, built it in 1962, one of the first black builders in Fulton County. Daniel leaned forward, intrigued. I didn't know there were black families here that early. Evelyn nodded. Just 3 at first. My father, Dr. Ellis, a dentist, and the Devises. Yes, Angela's in-laws. Her father-in-law was my classmate. But Pinewood's been mostly white for decades, Daniel said, puzzled. It was, Evelyn confirmed, her tone heavy. By 1970, only the Devises remained. The rest of us were driven out. Vandalism, threatening notes, sudden HOA assessments. My family sold and moved to Decatur. Daniel sat back, processing the weight of her words. So Pine Garganta Grove has a history of pushing out black homeowners. It does, Evelyn said. That's why I was so moved by what happened last summer and what followed. Angela told me everything when I visited her last week. She reached into her handbag, pulling out a faded black and white photograph, handling it with reverence. This is why I'm here. The photo showed children playing in a makeshift pool, a large metal tub, in a backyard Daniel recognized as his own, though bare of the modern pool and landscaping. The kids, all black, laughed and splashed while adults watched nearby. That's me, Evelyn said, pointing to a girl with pigtails. And that's my father. She indicated a tall man, standing proudly by the tub. This was 1965, during a heat wave. My father set up that tub because public pools wouldn't let us swim. Daniel studied the photo, emotion tightening his throat. This was taken right here in this yard. Evelyn nodded. The very spot where your pool stands. My father promised my mother a real pool someday, but we left before that dream came true." She touched the photo gently. "When Angela told me how your family stood your ground, how the HOA changed, how Pinewood came together, I had to meet you and share this." Daniel's voice was thick. "Thank you, Mrs. Brooks. This means more than you know. It's come full circle," Evelyn said, her eyes bright. "What my father started, your family finished. Black children swimming freely in Pinewood, belonging without question." As she prepared to leave, she paused. "Mr. Thompson, would it be too much to ask if my grandchildren could visit your pool this summer? They'd love to swim where their great-grandfather dreamed of building one." "It'd be an honor," Daniel replied. "Our pool's open to your family anytime." After Evelyn left, Daniel returned to the backyard and showed his kids the photo, recounting her story. They listened intently, even Ethan, who usually squirmed during serious talks. "So we're part of history?" Layla asked, tracing the photo's edges. "You are," Daniel said. "Standing your ground can change more than your own life. It can shape the future." Malik studied the image. "Does Ms. Hensley know about this? About Mrs. Brooks's family leaving?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "But if she did, it might have shown her she was repeating Pinewood's worst mistakes." As the sun set, casting golden light over the crystal-clear pool, Daniel felt a profound sense of closure. The ugliness of that July day had birthed something beautiful. The reclaiming of space, the restoration of dignity, and a community remade on inclusion. That evening, as he tucked Ethan into bed, the boy asked, "Dad, would Mrs. Brooks's dad be happy seeing our pool now?" Daniel smoothed Ethan's hair. "I think he'd be thrilled, son, not just for the pool, but because you can swim in it without anyone questioning your right to be here." Ethan nodded, drifting to sleep, and Daniel turned out the light, reflecting on belonging, how vital it is, how crushing when denied, how healing when affirmed. The pool, once a flashpoint of hatred, became a symbol of triumph. Over the summer, Evelyn's grandchildren joined Malik, Layla, Ethan, and the Carter twins, their laughter echoing through the backyard. Pinewood continued to evolve, its streets alive with block parties, cultural exchanges, and a shared commitment to fairness. The HOA, under Angela's leadership and Daniel's steady hand, became a model for other neighborhoods, even earning a feature in a local paper on inclusive community governance. Margaret and Charles Hensley faded from Pinewood's story. Their former home, now the Carters, pulsed with new life. Rumors swirled that the couple had relocated to a gated community in a neighboring county, but no one in Pinewood cared enough to confirm. Their absence was a quiet victory, proof that systems could change when people demanded better. Daniel, though still juggling hospital shifts and parenting, found balance in his HOA role, mentoring new residents and advocating for policies that ensured no family would face what has had. For Daniel's children, the pool incident was a defining lesson in resilience and justice. Malik grew more confident, taking on a leadership role in his school's diversity club. Layla channeled her thoughtfulness into writing, penning an essay about the incident that won a county contest. Ethan, ever the youngest, simply reveled in the pool's freedom, his fear of moving replaced by pride in their home. Together, they carried forward the legacy of Evelyn's father, James Brooks, and countless others who dreamed of belonging in places like Pinewood. One sweltering August afternoon, as Daniel watched a dozen kids splash in the pool, black, white, Latino, Asian, all Pinewood neighbors, he felt Vanessa's presence. She'd have loved this, he thought, her dream of a home where their kids could thrive fully realized. The laughter rising into the Georgia sky was more than play. It was a celebration of dreams deferred but never abandoned, now gloriously fulfilled. The arc of Pinewood's moral universe had been long, but it had bent firmly toward justice. Daniel knew challenges remained. Prejudice didn't vanish overnight, but Pinewood's transformation was a beacon. It proved that one family stand, backed by community's resolve, could rewrite a neighborhood story. As the sun dipped below the oaks, Daniel raised a glass of iced tea to the future, certain that Pinewood and his children would continue to shine. Thank you for joining the Thompson family's journey through this story of confrontation, justice, and community transformation. The events in Pinewood raise powerful questions about prejudice, accountability, and the fight for belonging. Have you ever witnessed or experienced injustice in your own community? How do you think we should address bias and violence? Through legal systems, community action, or personal courage? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Take a stand, voice your perspective, and let's spark a conversation about building a world where everyone belongs. Your voice matters. Let's hear it.